Hi, welcome to Karen K Reviews. Today I am reviewing Abbott Elementary Season 2, Episode 4, The Principal's Office. In the opening scene, we have Barbara singing happy birthday to her students in the most extra way ever. The kids are not loving it. They look annoyed, but they do love Barbara, and they're not going to say anything disrespectful about her singing. But the look on their faces says, here she goes again. I really like this scene because we get to see Barbara having fun, and last season she had a lot of more serious moments. Our initial problems in this episode are that Greg is having issues with his student Micah, who is interrupting his class and talking about Bluey instead of focusing on Greg's lessons. And with Janine, the meals that she's bringing to lunch are meals that she throws together because she was never taught to cook. Melissa notices this and tells her to come over to her place so she can help her with cooking. Jacob suggests that Greg send his student to Ava's office if he has done everything else that he can do. And Greg decides that he's going to give Jacob's strategy a chance. Next, we have Jacob and Janine showing up at Melissa's house for the cooking lesson. I was looking forward to this because I love Melissa's character. She is hilarious, and I knew some kind of way Janine would pry into Melissa's life. And of course, in typical Jacob fashion, he basically invited himself over. Melissa, well, she lets them in, but she doesn't quite welcome them in. She cusses them out and tells them to close their eyes and follow her voice after they spot a picture of her cousin Vinny. Once they start cooking, Janine starts asking Melissa about her sister, but Melissa is not having it, and every time Janine mentions it, she shuts it down. She even turns on the blender just to avoid talking about it. Later, Greg decides to act on the advice that he got from Jacob, which is to send Micah to Ava's office. He asks Janine if she would help him by watching his class for a minute while he walks Micah to Ava. Of course, Janine doesn't agree with this. She asks if this is really necessary. I also think this conversation is hilarious because it feeds off of what I was talking about last week with the two meeting up to talk in the hallway. And the romantic build between the two is something that Mr. Johnson, the custodian, notices because he says, "Are you two in a fight?" It makes sense that he would notice before other characters because the custodians tend to know everything that goes on at a school. Next, Micah is returned to the classroom by Ava, and of course, Ava has not disciplined him at all. She gave him a toy. The other kids see this, and now they all want a toy too, so everybody is screaming that they want a toy. So the whole plan is backfired, and Greg is basically back to square one. As a teacher, I am not opposed to sending students to the office if you've done everything else that you can do. But I am pro trying to handle discipline on your own before you try to send a student to the office, because unfortunately, when you send a student to the office, it is out of your hands as a teacher. And when you have to rely on an upper power to help with classroom management, you lose some control and respect. In Greg's situation, Micah's misbehavior is definitely something that can be handled in the classroom. So then we have a cutaway interview with Greg talking about discipline and how when he was growing up, he was disciplined for basically everything that could have been perceived as inappropriate behavior. I do believe that kids need a consequence, but I feel like behavior and consequences have to match up. I also know that when assigning consequences, you have to consider what is age appropriate. Next, Greg is called down to the office and he has a look of shock and fear. I can relate to this because as a teacher, I still feel anxiety when I'm called down to the principal's office because I don't know what I'm being called for. Once he arrives in the office, Ava basically tells him that if he doesn't like her methods, he needs to handle discipline on his own. And I get what point she was making as far as kids feeling shame, but for major misbehavior, kids have to have major consequences. Schools cannot just let kids do whatever they want and get no consequences because kids are kids and they're going to take advantage of that. So, when kids don't get consequences, you're going to end up with a chaotic classroom and no learning is going to take place. Then we have a scene where Janine has decided to get into Melissa's business and she tries to make a fake peace treaty and send it to Melissa's sister. But of course, Janine is just now learning how to cook. So that food turned out terribly. And Krista Marie thought Melissa was trying to kill her. Later, we have Greg getting advice on how to make his voice sound firm from Mr. Johnson. This is interesting because usually Greg does not want his advice, but of course, Mr. Johnson's advice is usually unsolicited. Barbara comes in and she basically is able to keep Greg from turning his class into a boot camp, possibly. I do feel like as a teacher, it is good to have a balance between maintaining classroom management and making sure that you understand that kids are going to make mistakes and kids still need love in addition to the consequences. I also like that Barbara mentioned that Greg is in a unique situation as a black male teacher because we do need more black male teachers in education because representation matters. For some of Greg's students, he may be the only educated black man that they see or the only positive male figure that they have in their lives. I also like that at the end, Greg did incorporate Bluey into the lesson because sometimes as educators, we do have those special circumstances where we have to accommodate for certain kids and help them to get engaged in the lesson. And as teachers, we need to do our best to make the lessons relate to the kids. I like seeing Greg having fun with his students because we know, of course, that Greg's dad was very strict with him growing up. So Greg often sees things in black and white as far as education and student behavior because of his upbringing. And I like that he's having to change. Here are a few stray observations. Greg has the best breaking the fourth wall with a look moments. They are hilarious and they have perfect comedic timing. I want to see Melissa's relationship with her sister continue, and I want to see more of Melissa outside of school. I also noticed that at the end, they're still hinting that Greg will one day be a principal by showing him sit down for a little while in Ava's chair. Melissa got an aide last week, so I'm wondering how that's going to come into play in the series, and I want to see their interactions with each other. Um, Janine, we know that she has a sister. I would like to see an episode where Janine's sister comes to visit. Also, when Melissa showed the picture of her at Krista Marie's wedding, did it look like Melissa was the bride to anyone else? Because to me, it kind of like Melissa might have been the bride. All right, so for my rating of this episode, I give it a B plus. I gave it a B plus because some of the parts about what Greg's character and the viewer are supposed to learn about discipline were a bit murky to me. However, the comedic moments were spot on. If you like this video, please subscribe, like, and share. Thank you for watching.